everyone. Today we have our another new episode and we will discuss on shaping the future of digital economy. We have our world famous speaker, Mr. Eric David Schumacher, Transhumanist Party Chairman, Mr. Kennedy, Professor David Smith, Dr. Talib Raphael, and Mr. Jason. First, I would like to give chance, Mr. Kennedy. What do you mean shaping the future of digital economy? And how transhumanist party doing more research policy developments this kind of activities for improving digital economy.
Yes,
Well,
thank you very much, Sharif, for inviting me to be on your show. The digital economy has been an important feature of people's lives over the past 30 years or so. And ever since the advent of the internet, there have been new opportunities. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. There have been new opportunities for people to earn a living.
I can't hear you.
And
Can you all hear me?
I'm getting some audio interference. Could everyone mute themselves, please, while I'm speaking? Yes. Thank you. Thank you. So
I think we lost all of them.
I think Dr. Taleb. Yeah. Okay. Let me start over. Thank you. So ever since the advent of the internet in the early 1990s, there have been new ways for people to make a living either through online commerce or through content creation. And these ways of making a living have liberated a lot of people from conventional constraints. For instance, historically, a lot of jobs have required manual labor to perform, and the digital economy has enabled another path for people. The digital economy has freed many people from the constraints of geography so that people no longer have to be tied to a particular place in order to work there. Now, obviously, that's not an opportunity that's available to every individual, but it is available to many more individuals than has been the case in the past. And during the COVID-19 pandemic in particular, as societies have had to adapt to unprecedented disruptions due to a highly infectious virus, making in-person contact less safe and less feasible in many cases, the digital economy and digital ways of interacting have really come to the forefront. And as a result, a lot of jobs, a lot of knowledge work types of occupations were able to continue without major interruptions, which is remarkable. It would not have happened about 20 years ago, even if we had had a comparable pandemic. Now, the digital economy also, interestingly enough, has enabled many goods and services to become more affordable and more accessible. And indeed, some goods, for instance, audio files or image files, which previously would have been bundled with physical media, think about vinyl records or CDs, for example, now can be disassociated from those. So you can share a file of a musical work, or you could share an image file of an artwork, whereas previously you would have had to purchase a physical painting or at least purchase a print of some sort. So this has enabled a lot more content to become accessible to a lot more people. Now, some of these aspects of the digital economy have actually, in effect, been demonetized. So you don't necessarily have to pay for everything that you consume online. And some of this is completely legitimate. So the content creators want you to have this for free because it increases the exposure to their work. Or you can access a lot of historical public domain works for free. So interestingly enough, even as the digital economy has created more opportunities for people to make a living, it has also created more opportunities for people to access content without having to pay for it. Now, what is the future of the digital economy? I think the future of the digital economy primarily is going to be focused on expanding the range of human capability. So I think a lot of people are fixated on traditional modes of content creation. And people are wondering, for instance, with these new AI generation systems that can generate very realistic, sometimes interesting images, what will be the place for human artists? Or if files can be shared very easily, what will be the place for human artists and human musicians? I would say there's always going to be a place for human creativity, both in terms of envisioning content and in terms of curating content. So the AI generation systems could provide a lot of variance upon a given prompt, but it's still the responsibility of a human being, one, to envision the prompt, and two, to select among the variants that the AI system puts forth. So human creativity is not going anywhere. It's just that the greater efficiency of content creation and reproducibility is going to create new purposes for which human creativity is going to be directed. And furthermore, it's going to free up more time for people to be creative in different ways and combine all of these products of digital tools, including AI-based tools, into something new, something more advanced, something that can take our imaginations and our capabilities a step further. And I think a lot of the digital economy in the future is going to be a service-based economy, where creative humans are going to not so much sell goods, but sell their talents. And their talents are always going to be in demand, precisely because human creativity is inexhaustible. So those are my initial thoughts on the future of the digital economy. I would be quite interested to hear what everyone else has to say and to partake in this conversation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for your excellent analysis. Now I request Dr. Talib Rafael, you are from developing nations, from emerging economy. What is your view about future of digital economy?
Okay, the digital economy is here to stay, for sure. We at the developing world have access to internet, so we have access to digital economy. As long as we have an access to internet, we're meeting together now, this moment, in one of the outcomes of the COVID-19 outcome. COVID-19 has changed our lives forever. They have also created a form of meetings that have not been experienced before. They also changed the kind of services that we get. For example, restaurants are not there anymore. Restaurants are more of delivery. The delivery thing and buying online has become the norm now. And also travel and tourism. Travel and tourism has been widely affected, one of the most affected sectors in COVID-19. This sector has suffered a lot, and it is a sector that cities in many parts of the world, including the developing world, have a lot to depend on for that. And I would say that travel and tourism is coming back very slowly now. But I'm not sure that this is something that we could sustain. What's happening in China now is very scary. In China, we have rebirth of COVID-19, and it's becoming a very serious matter. China is a major provider of tourists all over the world, a major receiver of tourists as well. So tourism is a very important element to consider here. And I believe that the future of digital economy is going to be stronger and more effective. Not because we want to, but because we have to. It's not a matter of choice anymore. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Talib. Now I request Mr. Eric.
The challenges include when you look at what economy is and what digital is. So economies are wide and complex, and things we do in economies is we want to do things like establish value, make transfer of value possible, but it's also a lot about implementing policies and reducing risk and mitigating disruption and changes between just example, currency values changing and inflation risks. When we look at businesses, we go to do a lot of finance. So there's kind of this balance between finance, accounting. Of finance being is how do you do the spreadsheets and things everybody looks at to determine value? Is that company growing? Is it safe? And so you have a lot of people doing these financial statements. And then you have accountants who try to say, well, how are we going to measure success and group these and track them? Well, the digital economy means that we can digitize everything and track it much better. So it's much more fodder for the accountants to say, are we succeeding in where the company view wants to go? But it makes the outside view of financial statements go absolutely crazy to say, well, okay, we've got your balance sheets and things we're used to looking at, but now we can do things with those that don't really track, what is the real risk? We're doing things like leverage and loans and bonds. It can go absolutely crazy to try and match the world on how we look at it today versus how it could be and how it's changing. For example, everybody tries to get their quarterly numbers right and your annual numbers, and you go, and if you don't make it, the stock market punishes you and investors punish you. And then companies like Tesla said, yeah, we're not going to worry about that anymore. If you look at the growth of Amazon and Tesla, and if you use those traditional financial statements, and they don't look good in a lot of the growth. They just don't match up. In fact, several companies have said we're not even going to put out our annual numbers for public companies that way. For the private companies, we're not going to put out our numbers that way because they don't make sense for us to try and predict today what our value is going to be. Nobody gets that right. How many cars are we actually going to sell? How many factories? We don't know. We have these plans, but they don't come up. They don't deliver like we expect they do. So, Tesla does things like just track how many of our cars are actually driving on the road today. And that's what they track. Well, wait a minute. That's in violation of all the standard accounting and finance methods. You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to worry about these other things. So again, the biggest challenge we have is figuring out what this is going to really mean to us versus what we are trying, how we look at things today. And the other thing is when you talk about economy and the transfer, we can transfer a lot more things than dollars or euros. We can transfer credits. We can transfer good. You can define goodwill. You can put favors in. The digital economy lets you use more than money. You can concentrate on value for effort. So for this much, well, I'll give you this much value if you give me this much effort or value. So the exchange is right that way. And then you put in all these markets that are starting, which go around traditional finance ways. So, now you've got entities trying to reduce risk and inflation by changing the economy and the finances to balance it. And now you have all these ways you can go around that. And it's like, oh, well, okay. The other thing with the digital economy is you can actually put inflation curves and things into the currency itself, which is very tough to do with dollars. So now you have the possibility to manage some of these economies and markets differently. And we don't know how that all comes together because there isn't one standard. I know David Smith is very good on standards and policies. Well, to me, the digital economy, the standards and policies are going to be very tough. And the other thing is there's a lot of people invested in making money off of managing that whole process. And now you can go around that. So there's some people threaten and saying, well, wait a minute, I make my money by understanding this better and manipulating it or managing it. And now it's like, like in some of the markets in the digital currency, people go, I'm not using this money at the moment. I'll loan it out at this rate or that rate for this term for a week, a day, a month. Well, that's way different than the banks. So how does a bank make money managing that thing when people are going around doing that? So I'm not saying it's all there yet. But to me, the biggest thing is there's a real challenge in how do we try and get these management processes, which have grown into the banking and finance and government policies, and how do we then transfer value between each other, and what is that value? It's going to be way different.
Thank you. Now I request Mr. David Schumacher.
What a great panel you have, Dr. Sharif. I've been taking copious notes, and I find that I'm much more interested in what I've heard than what I wrote to say for myself this morning. But let me start anyway. So, when we talk about a digital economy, we have one, as Gennady and others have alluded to, because of the internet. The internet being digital forced us into a digital way to transfer value, if you will. So think about that. We're talking about shaping the future of the economy, or digital economy. That means that it's going to be shaped, at least in part, by wherever we go. One of the places that we went in the past is the internet, but we're also going into space. We're also going into metaspace. Wherever humans go, we're going to need to have this way to be able to transfer value. So that's going to shape the future of the digital economy just based on that alone. How that will happen, well, I think it's going to be interesting to watch. And while the digital economy is rightly more than just money, the baseline is still money. I mean, that's what we think of when we think about being able to trade, do whatever it is. And so I guess that then makes the basis of this discussion digital currency. We've been on this trajectory for a long time. In the Roman days, they would stamp a coin with a picture of the emperor on it, and that was deemed legal tender. So it was the government that decided what you could do and required that particular use of exchange was how you settled your debts. Of course, we can fast forward to the 20th and 21st century and see that governments still do that, but do that in a different way. But it's still government centered. Some say for control, sure, but also going to what Eric was talking about as far as risk is concerned. I have more faith and less risk in, say, $100 US note than I do in an IOU from even a very good friend that says, I owe you $100. So government adds that capability of being able to reduce risk. And as we look at what's developing as digital currency today, Bitcoin, for example, as the poster child of digital currencies, or at least cryptocurrencies. One of its main ways to reduce risk is not through governmental control, but by a meticulous, non-fungible bookkeeping, the blockchain, which we've talked about. So that's a way to reduce risk. But will that be what digital currency will look like going forward? Will we reduce risk by using stablecoin, which is a cross, I guess, between a cryptocurrency that can fluctuate on the open market to one that's tied to the value of an asset, say the US dollar, for example? So that adds stability, hence the name stablecoin, and also perhaps reduces risk. But I think one that's coming on slowly is central bank digital currency. And then that's going back and adding government into the digital currency arena to help reduce this risk. The United States and other countries are working on central bank digital currencies, and there are a few countries out there that already have something that they're piloting along this line. Who will win? How will this shape into the future? Goes back to what I said earlier. Wherever we go, we're going to need a means of exchange, and the means of exchange that suits what we need is where that future is going to go. So those are my thoughts, and I'm more than anxious to hear the rest of the panelists and another round from the first ones that went. Thank you, Dr. Sharif.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. David Schumacher. Now I request Mr. David Smith.
You know, it's almost not fair for the Davids to go right after each other, but yeah, this topic is a fantastic topic because the digital economy actually has multiple futures as you look at it. And uh, the digital economy is not going to be a disruptive influence as you see it going from evolutionary breakthrough change. It's going to be more of an incremental, distinctive upgrade because the fact that it is in every country, the fact that it is in so many languages and so many different forms and fashions, it's going to be more of an incremental change as we shape the future of the digital economy and where it's going. You know, if I begin to step back and think about the digital economy, connectivity is the future for enabling a digital future for all. And with the exception of a few countries, it's an inclusive feature that connects all citizens to really the benefit of the, well, fourth industrial revolution, Web 3.0, the metaverse, advanced healthcare, advanced banking, all these other things going forward. And you'll see it uh, there. One real key feature, though, of the digital economy is that it has the ability to help shape and change. And like I said, this change is going to be more of a distinctive change than a breakthrough change because the nature of the internet is such that you cannot just replace one internet with another with all new features, functions, hardware, software, and everything. It has to be this incremental advancement. Um, and we're going to see that go forward quite a bit. From many things, though, there are some advanced innovations that are going to really help shape the future of the digital economy. And you've heard me talk about many of them. But as has been said by several people, digitalization. Today, everything's becoming digital. You know, if you look at a device, takes power, costs more than say $100. It has computer chips in it. Increasingly, they all communicate, and you're seeing that going forward. We're seeing this type of digitalization look at a way to make a more healthy world, a more sustainable world, a world where education and resources have access to everyone, like what Dr. Talib was saying, and before. The digital world has also changed our dynamics of demographics. It has changed our dynamics of how we uh, perceive information. I was in a discussion during Christmas here in Austin, and some people were reminding me of the fact that when someone died far away or a news flash happened, we got a telegram. And a telegram was the way you often found out about this stuff. And then you had times where if something happened in Australia or in Brazil, it would take a couple of days for you to know about it. Today, we're there live in real time when it's happening anywhere in the world. And that has dramatically shaped the future of our digital economy. This access to not just recent information, but real-time information, real-time news, real-time communication. The growth of the Internet of Things sensors. We have tremendous access to real-time data, real-time imaging. So those are some of the things that are dramatically shaping of it. You know, we've heard so much about artificial intelligence and how it's changing business and society and everything. Yeah, I'm convinced that we're using software, we're using hardware, we're using neural networks, we're using biological computing and others that are becoming increasingly intelligent and can make work a lot easier and can give us insights. But AI can only be a booster of digitization in a climate of connectivity. One of the challenges with AI is, how do you train it? How does it learn? How does it respond to different demographics, different culture, all the areas like that? And we still have quite a ways to go until we can look at some perfect learning mechanisms to really enhance AI on a global basis. Many new tools coming out. I love some of the new tools. I have been experimenting with some, which are just fantastic. But AI is going to be a real driver of this digital transformation that we see. But we need to go ahead and understand, how do we trust AI? How do we trust the digital systems that we have? Eric mentioned that I tend to look at compliance, regulations, and all privacy and security quite a bit. Well, I guess when you have as many scars on my back and chest as I do from those, Eric, you try to eliminate some of that pain going forward. But the future of the digital economy has to be set in standards, because you want it to be a global economy where everyone can exchange things and know the rules of the road. We know we have to respect privacy. I've seen too many people who've had their privacy stripped away and the significant harm it has done to them as individuals. I have seen security blown away where companies have been put out of business because of security violations. And as we go further in the digital economy, it's going to become companies, individuals become much more dependent on the digital economy. So those areas of security, privacy, compliance, regulation, how you're going to conduct commerce globally, how you're going to do healthcare globally, all are going to become very, very important, and we have to deal with them. And I could keep on going for so long, but let me, for this part, just close with one part. Knowledge, education, and lifelong learning are going to be the cornerstone key to the future of shaping the digital economy. We know that particularly higher education, but education in all, because of COVID and many other factors, have gone through a transformation, just like we've seen healthcare go through a transformation. But lifelong learning, enabled by the future of the digital economy, is a concept that we must embrace globally. It is the key to collaboration. It is the key to advancing sustainability for people, for families, for countries, for the world. And the concept of really using the future of the digital economy to revolutionize the way we approach education, to revolutionize the way we approach healthcare, are our key imperatives, our key cornerstone for where we're going with the future of this digital economy. So thank you, Sharif.
Thank you, Mr. Jason.
Thank you. And for the comments so far, I think I'll try to work backwards through the order of speakers and sort of relay on some of the important topics that they've all set the table with here, and get it back around to them again within time, because there are a lot of us here today, and we've already introduced so many topics that now it's time to put them all together. So to start with David Smith's comments, I think that he was referring to information quality and the prevalence of information as the economic building block. In purchasing power itself, is information. It's a denomination, and it's a proportional one. And so the form it takes technologically is it is a digital representation currently, in the current form, and that the difference between it being a digital representation or a physical representation is an advancement that is long set in. We're already used to that, sort of. To know these things and to learn them all is just the ultimate empowerment. It truly is, because it introduces a healthy competition, and that the incremental pace. I think that the next point was the incremental pace, the pace and shape of network expansion. I think it's correct. I mean, the web gets built one website at a time, and the user base expands one platform at a time. A person is introduced to a new platform, and it becomes something they achieve purchasing power with, and that it's a real dilemma in all economies, truly, to distribute purchasing power in a way that has justice, in a way that everybody's satisfied with, and that I think that the concept of property comes with the concept of justice psychologically, in that a person will understand the thing as though they earned it, or that they deserve it, or that it's their rightful designation. And so learning and having a platform and being part of a network effect is a way of earning purchasing power. And that's the answer that people are trying to get to with jobs programs. If you were to look at the public discourse and what the goals are, maybe one of the top three in every campaign is to create jobs. And so that they can distribute purchasing power, and so that they can distribute purchasing power in a way that people are satisfied with, that there's intrinsic justice in the manner, somehow, some way. Any public policy is shaped around enriching the people. There are different philosophies on how to do that, and that the answer to the question is in information. It's an information product that we can arrive at together. We have to arrive at through, the mechanisms we're doing without geographic barriers up, without even needing to be synchronous with it, that we can have asynchronous communication because of its digital nature. I mean, to David Schumacher's point about central bank digital currencies, I think that it taking a digital form is already partially set in, and that it's not worse necessarily that the former methodology of having like the emperor's face stamped on a coin, and only that coin is redeemable at the emperor's tax collectors. That's like the redemption layer of it, in that it's legal tender is redeemable forward. It's forward redeemable under force of law, and that at the end of the cycle of money, everybody can clear house and clear their ledger with the state, with legal tender, and that there will always be legal tender as long as there are nations, and every nation needs to govern and needs to have the organizing principle in effect, that the money that they've created for their nation is an aspect of their sovereignty. Doing that digitally compared to doing it physically, to my mind, actually has advantages to the extent of transparency, because historically, currency debasement has been easier when it's physical. Easier, not more difficult. Fiat currency, like paper money. And people are concerned about the supply of money. They're concerned about that as an aspect comparatively between cryptocurrencies and fiat currencies. A central bank digital currency could be, it's soft clay at this point. It could be any variety of locked in variables, and that it'll be up to scrutiny. There are very well informed, very well educated people that are representing public interest that will scrutinize it. And my only hope is that it doesn't get lost in the noise of alarmism that is unfounded, because like the information we're sort of parsing out culturally, it's a cultural problem here and everywhere. I'm speaking for myself, right, from where I am, and I'm not speaking for the group by any means. I can only imagine what it's like for others, but there are aspects of information that we need to know, and we should be concerned, and we should prioritize. And then around all the important true information that we need to know and organize around, there's also a lot of alarmism that is at least partially unfounded, you know, like half-truth concerns and stuff. And so the difficulty for that is becoming unreasonable for the average person. I feel stressed by the difficulty of parsing that out and the obligation to do it, and the economic imperative for sound information. It has always been true. It still is true. I mean, some of it stitches back to what Eric was getting to about healthy competition for the technology of money. I mean, take it as a note for any nation thinking about their central bank digital currency. Take it as a note for anybody thinking about creating a DAO or somebody creating a stable coin, because there's room for healthy competition, truly, with this. And that one's philosophical interpretation for the redeemability of money and the soundness of money, I mean, really boils down to one point, which is, can you circulate it with confidence? Can the next person receive it and take it on its proof, at its face, in its technology, to see within its technology that I can pass this on to the next participant in the whole market, and that it has like universal acceptance. The universal acceptance comes from the place of also being able to spend it again. And the difference between David Schumacher's friend, who gave him an IOU, even a very reliable IOU, is that you can't spend that to the next person forward. That's the main difference. And that in a digital technology sense, though, that is possible. That a really good receivable, if it's viewable within the technology, that is the receivable, could actually be spent forward, hypothetically, for example. And to Talib's point, I think we need to come together across cultures so badly. And we always had been. You know, like economically speaking, business brings people together. It's ideology that, like traditionally, it's ideology that drives the wedge that interferes with business. But even people who disagree really passionately for their ideologies can rationalize to the extent of like where to put the pattern of interaction. I think that's a way of describing it. I mean, I was going to go to the metaphor of a fence, but that's not the answer, because the fence is really just one small implement within a whole pattern of interaction. And that pattern of interaction can have commerce and it can have mutual benefit, even if it's an expression of competition, even if it's actually an expression of very intense competition. As long as the pattern is understood, that people recognize the moves within that pattern, so to speak, and that is, again, an information. And so health and wellness and meeting the needs of others, these are market basics, right? Recognizing the needs of others and providing to them in a way that allows for competition and is welcoming to competition. We get that answer. And I think that I'd take it back to worker productivity. I feel like the point I wanted to arrive at in all this is that it looks like everything's becoming digital, but it's not that everything's becoming digital quite. It's more that everything is touched by something digital, like that there's a digital representation of the existence of a thing, even the physical things, and even the abstract things, even the non-existent things have digital representations. And so it looks like everything's becoming digital, but the important things are still real. The important things are still real, and some of the important things are still totally abstract and forever will be abstract only. Like concept of wealth, the concept of encapsulating value and having a proportionate purchasing power to move around and taking the measurement of that. And through digital advancements, though, the average productivity of a worker has skyrocketed. Tracing back a few decades since the beginning of the digital economy, and we're vertical at this point in the curve. Because it's not that one worker does more by themselves. It's just that the average gets taken up by some of the mechanization that's driven by information. And so there's the side of the equation we have not identified yet is what is in the bundle of goods in the economic productivity of the digital economy, and the way that we use information products to drive automation and drive mechanization for productivity in reality, and representing that in a digital form to represent its proportionate purchasing power. They should work together, because where I wanted to land on is how there is no economy in just hyper financializing everything, right? In that some philosophies of business have gotten pretty carried away with themselves by thinking that they are an economic engine simply by accruing more purchasing power to themselves mathematically, by doing mathematic manipulations, and by accruing more purchasing power to themselves, but also not increasing real productivity in the world. That is not a wealth creating engine necessarily speaking. I think it's important to note that the temptation with digital assets and digital currencies is we're going straight to just hyper financializing it and thinking that we're making economic gains just by doing mathematical manipulations to increase our proportionate purchasing power, where the correct start to the virtuous cycle is focused on driving the productivity of the worker, of increasing the productivity of the worker on the average, and encapsulating that value in a technology of money. So I appreciate everybody hearing me out, because that was sort of long-winded, but there's so many more aspects even to the topics already tabled that I can't wait to put it around again and hear more comments.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy, World Talent Economy Forum, right now we are working with 300 million people. We speak in same language, it's Bangla, fifth largest community around the world. But I want to say it does not have good exposure in the global media. It does not have good internet connections. Yes, we work with central bank. They do not accept cryptocurrencies. We are working with different cities, grassroots level people. We are developing smart villages, smart cities. Uh, like maybe for you or all of our speakers, this kind of city is very new. Lokhipur, Noakhali, uh, Narayanganj, Rajbari, different districts we are working. We are working with millions of people and trying to uplifting them. But we have a lot of obstacle, especially we do not have access with the modern science, engineering, and technology, what you have. We are working with Dhaka University, with Asanullah University. We are bringing Nikola Tesla Technology Conference, but still there is a huge gap. And from these 300 million people, I know around 60% they are youth. More than 150 million people, they are youth. So what do you think? What is their future? How we can overcome from this obstacle and challenges? Do you think that your transhumanist parties can contribute for this community and for my grassroots level people? Because the big countries and the big corporation, they come these communities, only they focus on the big place, big cities, but they never focus my 22,000 institutions. But we need to uplift them. What do you think?
Yes, thank you, Sharif. And I think this is an important question. My view is access to good infrastructure is key, because a lot of the content in this digital economy is accessible free of charge in terms of education, in terms of uplifting. If you have good internet access, you have the world's store of knowledge at your fingertips. If you have spotty or intermittent internet access, then that is an issue, but it doesn't have to be an insurmountable obstacle. It's not an insurmountable obstacle because even with sporadic internet access, you can still download text, you can still download images fairly readily. And even if you have internet access for a few hours a day, you can download enough information to your computer that will keep you busy for the time that you don't have internet access. If you look at, for instance, Project Gutenberg or Wikipedia or any of a number of educational sites that are available online, you can spend decades literally reading materials from those sources, materials that have been in the public domain for a long time, great historical literature or encyclopedia articles, or teach yourself mathematics, or teach yourself physics, or teach yourself computer science. It's all a matter of available time. And when I look at how people in the Western world interact with digital media, I would say there's another challenge that needs to be overcome, and that is just finding the time. So in the Western world, we generally have technology. Some places still suffer power outages or intermittent internet outages, but generally people can route around those and find the content that they need. And of course, in the Western world, most of us can stream high definition videos to our computers or to our cell phones, and we can do that. And we have an abundance of options to choose from. What we still don't have is an abundance of time to really delve into all of those options. This is why I am a supporter of indefinite life extension. At least that's one of my motivations. I just see so much knowledge out there to explore and so much interesting content that I could delve into, but I only have so much time during the day, and we all lead quite busy lives. So I would say in the developing world, the challenge is how to find the time away from the daily struggle for survival. Because the more people have to struggle for survival day to day, the less time, the less opportunity they have to focus on higher order pursuits like education, like self-actualization, like creative projects. And that is going to be a multifaceted challenge that individuals and institutions in the developing world will have to contend with. Now, I think a lot of the progress in fields like the internet or cryptocurrencies or AI has come during the very early stages of those technologies, when there was a kind of free-for-all where innovation and iteration could occur very rapidly. We saw in the 1990s with the early internet a proliferation of personal websites, which were slow and cumbersome to build. If anyone has experience with platforms like GeoCities that I got my start on back in the early 2000s, but it existed in the 1990s, it was a lot of effort to build a site like that, but people had freedom and they had the sense of unlimited possibility. And so they put in the time, they put in the effort, as long as they saw the transformational potential before them. And I think this is also a phenomenon that could be replicated within the developing world. Unfortunately, what happens over time, and what has happened with a lot of these digital sectors, is ossification has set in. So established institutions have come in and they've tried to impose their own paradigms onto this new realm and have essentially introduced artificial scarcity and artificial inefficiencies. And this is where the concept of a centralized digital currency does concern me. Now, that's not to say the US dollar should not have a digital incarnation. It already does. We do a lot of our dollar-based transactions digitally. We do a lot of transactions in other currencies digitally as well. But to turn the blockchain into a centralized government-managed system in many ways undermines the original dream of cryptocurrencies, which is to have a store of value and a medium of exchange that is independent of anyone's ability to interfere with and essentially control individuals using that medium. So the original dream of Bitcoin, as articulated by Satoshi Nakamoto, was to be a decentralized system for transactions that would be anonymous, and yet you would have a kind of decentralized accountability, but it would be free from the machinations of central banks. The major problem, of course, with the machinations of central banks is that they can be highly inflationary and they can lead people's purchasing power to be deprived of them. However, what has happened is this strange situation where Satoshi Nakamoto's dream hasn't been realized because cryptocurrencies have continued to be primarily used for speculative purposes, and we've seen wild swings in their market prices to a greater extent than with centralized fiat currencies. So this is kind of paradoxical, and I think it has fueled the call for more centralized control over cryptocurrencies, because I think some people will say, well, yes, with the Federal Reserve, you could have 3% inflation per year or 8% inflation per year, or maybe closer to 15% inflation per year, which is likely what we now have in the United States. And yet, there isn't going to be a 1,000% swing in the value of that currency within a few months. So people might be tempted to think this is safer. However, the problem is, one, centralized monetary policy has been deliberately inflationary, whereas that's not necessarily the case with decentralized instruments like cryptocurrencies. And two, centralized monetary policy and any centralized control over financial instruments could become ideological very quickly. And as has been noted, ideology tends to pose barriers to commerce. Sometimes those barriers can be overcome. Other times, especially in times of greater crisis and turmoil, governments tend to use ideology as a way to distract attention from the pressing day-to-day issues that people face. So right now we have a severe worldwide pandemic. We do have inflation. We have supply chain disruptions. And I think a lot of governments are using ideology to shift people's attention away from that and manufacture enemies for people to try to get riled up about. And this is where a centralized currency would worry me, because those enemies, however they're defined, could very easily find their life savings in jeopardy. They could very easily find their ability to transact in jeopardy if they're only dependent on this kind of centralized currency that could very easily be taken away. So I think it's very important to have alternatives for people, alternative stores of value. Cryptocurrencies were intended to provide that, but they haven't been harnessed very effectively as media of exchange yet. And the stability of their value is still very much, let's say, leaving a lot to be desired. So how do we solve that going forward? Stablecoins were a good concept, but unfortunately, the organizations involved in essentially supporting the stable coins also did some machinations such that they weren't exactly pegged to the fiat currencies, even though they were supposed to be. I do think ultimately we need good people within the digital economy. We need good people within these systems who, through their own conscience and their own ideals, want to create this world where people are not dependent on the ideological zeitgeist. They're also not dependent on wild speculative swings or people who might be manipulating the system. So who are the good people who can step into this system and make sure that it serves the purposes that it was intended to serve for all? And I leave that as an open question, because I think that's a question we're going to be contending with for the next decade or so, until we figure this out, until we figure out what the most beneficial role of cryptocurrencies is going to be both in the developing world and in the more developed world, though I don't think it's quite as developed as it should be yet. So thank you, Sharif, for this opportunity, and I would welcome any thoughts on these issues. I think there might be a lag with Sharif, but anybody who wants to step in is welcome.
I think I probably went after David last time, so since he's gone, let me jump in here. I believe I echo many of your thoughts with what you said. However, I view a slightly different view on cryptocurrencies. I think you're going to see the evolution of digital currencies. And in the United States currency today and most global currencies are digital, whether we know it or not. Today, 100% of clearing between banks to other banks and from nations to other nations, and actually between almost every retail store is done electronically. So we're into this whole digital currency system anyways. And I think you made one point, but let me make it even a little bit stronger. The way most countries in the world help stabilize their country's economy is through the national banks. And one of the biggest constraints from going to a classic cryptocurrency with no authority in it is the inability for nations to use currency as a way to regulate their economy. And this isn't just in recent time. You can go back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years and see that being used as a tool to help the nation be stable and survive. So cryptocurrencies are there. There's a lot of people who want them, particularly people who do not want governments to know anything they're doing. But the reality is that's going to be a hard sell in a lot of places. Are you going to see enhanced digital services offered by regulated people? 1,000%. And you're going to see a tremendous growth in that as we look at the future of this digital economy. But I'm also seeing places in the digital economy where I'm really very excited as we look at the impacts that can happen. I will tell you, for example, on this panel today, I've been blessed to hear the insights from Dr. Talib in areas that my mind here in Austin, Texas would have never received. And the differences there. Dr. Talib and others on some of the World Talent Economic Forum have helped me revise my views of the United States. I mean, I have a very strong view and have done a lot in industry and government to help do it. But hearing some of the different perspectives has helped moderate some of my views. And I think the future of the digital economy, we're going to see more of that globally as we begin to understand each other's unique perspectives. I've traveled extensively around the world, but your view as a tourist is different than when you can get in to hear more. And as the connectivity continues to increase in the digital economy, as our ability for online real-time translation increases and others like that, it's just going to tremendously help the world understand each other more and the world understand the differences. And hopefully by understanding the differences, the future of the digital economy will help us solve more of those differences, or at least appreciate the differences more. Putting my professional futures hat on for one last time during this discussion, I think we will see the future of the digital economy dramatically change because what I'm seeing the digital economy doing in the after effects of not only COVID, but the other pandemic potentials we see, the other manufacturing logistic disasters we see, is it's to me, we're seeing efforts around the world going back to where it's not all about currency. I'm seeing groups like one I've been helping where they want to go and put a sharing economy back in place. I can remember back in Texas, there's still communities that do barn raising. There's still communities that will put their money together to go buy seeds and to grow crops. You're seeing more and more in the entrepreneur community, not just in the United States, but globally, where friends, family, and fools are coming together to empower entrepreneurship. You'll see crowdfunding happening more and more. So the digital economy is allowing us to go back to the sharing economy, the economy where we can depend more on other individuals as well, and not just as a fiat currency type of transaction. And if I want to feel really proud of what I'm seeing happening in the future of the digital economy, it's the whole things around that sharing, around education, around helping each other survive, even in healthcare, where we see the movement back to genetics-based medicine. We see the movements to immune therapy as a way to uh, eliminate cancer and other things like that. We're seeing the digitalization and the digital economy allowing us to do things in a much faster way that would not be possible without it. So, Dr. Sharif, that's part of mine. I mean, I think I've had too much Christmas the last couple of days because I'm almost more positive than Eric's laughing than I normally am. But those are the things which I think I see us going towards. And I'm really excited by what I'm seeing. So, Dr. Sharif, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. A. Yes.
So, I'm saying this from a couple point of views. One was David Smith's initial view, which is we're going to evolutionarily move ahead from our finance system, as intricate and powerful as it is, but we're going to find new ways to use it as it's pushed by these other things. We're going to find new ways to reduce risk, to provide services, to enhance. On the other hand, let's look to what Gennady was talking about, down to the level where people don't have a lot. And in order to succeed in those environments, you kind of need two things. One is you need knowledge and resources. So the internet can help with the resources, even if you don't have full connectivity. It reminds me of the story, the book written by the guy that built out of by himself, figured out how to buy a windmill and save his village. And once he came out and saw Google, he went, "Oh my God, if I'd had this, I could have done this in 5 minutes." This stuff is wonderful. So knowledge, but resources are really tough. I notice, I live close to the Mexican borders and from the USA to the Mexican, and you cross and all the banking rules. It's so hard to get a loan. It's so hard to do anything. So a lot of people have built their own finance and own economies to loan each other money. I also look at, when I put money into Kiva, it donates little bits of money all over the world to make big differences to buy businesses. So the nice thing about it, one of the things we talked about was risk. Would I take $100 from the government or an IOU from a friend? Well, okay, but what if two different entities are going to loan you money? Well, with the digital currency, you can have guarantees and conditions built right in to the loan of resources. And by the way, those resources don't just have to be money, but with things like smart contracts in there, things happen automatically. You don't even have to trust the legal system things can transfer, things can do it. You can put conditions. So actually you can reduce risk by putting those things right into the digital economy. So from the big view, I see the financial institution and the governments and policy and all those things being implemented to do a lot of the protection that David Smith talks about, and that I believe too. Privacy, risk, those are really important. Policy, those are really important. On the other hand, there's a bunch of people who are going to be in the middle trying out all kinds of things. Some are going to work, some are not. They're going to be both valuable to people who don't have a lot of resources and giving them resource, and valuable to those people that are trying to drive the slow moving ship, and that takes a long time to respond. But the one thing I would say is our view of economies and what is digital is going to change in ways that we didn't perceive, and is the tendency in business tends to go for more shareholder. How do we just benefit the owners to stakeholders? How do we benefit everyone? I don't even know how to predict all of that, but it's going to be interesting.
Thank you, Dr. Talib.
Yes, I have listened very carefully to all what has been said. And I think that the digital economy, as I said, is here to stay. For the developing world, it's a very important factor here, because it equalizes the inequalities in this world. That's something that we should always think about. I feel I have the same opportunity as somebody in the United States or somebody in Europe, but without a digital economy, I couldn't have that. And it's important to note that people here are using internet and are using the digital economy very, very well, because even the cryptocurrency, the cryptocurrency is not something that we can't understand yet. Now, it's become something that we can deal with, and it's this notion of democracy and the notion of not making governments interfere in our business that is very important in this cryptocurrency kind of thing. And it's part of the digital economy as well, because what you do here is knowledge is available for everybody, whether governments like it or not. Opinions are available to everybody as well. That's an important factor that we should always keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jason.
Thank you. I think that I'll pick right up where you left off on that. The proliferation of knowledge is perhaps the most beneficial economic thing that a person can do for themselves. Think about it in a immediate sphere, a neighborhood, and that a person is better off in measurable ways if all the people around them have the right knowledge, if they're all aware of the right thing, if they're all better educated, that they make better decisions together, and they formulate better responses to their opportunities. The topic I wanted to introduce just quickly here was opportunity cost, because with digital economy, a person is deciding what they're going to do with their career and their time. And I think that I'm going to go right back to, I'm sorry, I'm struggling to read your name, and forgive me if I say it wrong, but is it Gennady?
Gennady.
Gennady. Sorry. Thank you for clarifying. The point that you were making is that I lost it just for a second because I started thinking about your name. It'll come right back.
Sure.
It is about the scarcity of time, and that there's a concept of scarcity embedded in the technology of money, and that it is a distillation of scarcity for the material world, in that the scarcity of money is meant to represent the opportunity costs of industry, in that the industrial apparatus cannot manufacture all varieties to meet all preferences and everything was just like that, and just have it all on the shelf waiting for nobody. You know, they have to have a signal that matches demand to production, and everybody is sort of evaluating the opportunity costs in the behavior. What are we doing with our leisure time, and what are we doing with our professional time, and what are we choosing as consumers as well? There's information there's information to consider about opportunity costs. About, let's say a person decides, I'm going to purchase a thing, but then later the next day finds out, I could have got a better deal. There was another alternative up there that was a better fit. It was a better match, or a lower price. And that having perfect information is the ultimate economic advantage. But it is counterbalanced with perfect information around opportunity cost for what we're going to consume and what we're going to produce professionally here. So those considerations take shape in the digital economy. Think about like the time you're spending as the ultimate scarcity, or it is. Right. At the end of the day, the representation of purchasing power is limited by that, and it is an encapsulation of everybody else's time that they spent productive. So, since we've gone a little over time, I think I'll just say those points for now, and I look forward to more with the group.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
So I think we have heard a lot of interesting and constructive thoughts today regarding the future of the digital economy and how it empowers people, especially people in the developing world who, as Dr. Taleb pointed out, have access now to many of the same opportunities that have historically been limited to people in Western countries. But also, of course, the digital economy raises some questions, it raises some challenges, including privacy, including issues of centralized control versus decentralization, including issues of how people will manage their still scarce time as the ultimate resource that they have. And in my view, it is essential to continue on the path of technological innovation to try to resolve those challenges, but a very particular kind of technological innovation that places the power in the hands of individuals who seek to make a positive difference in their own lives. I think whenever we have these problems that relate to technology, it is because somebody else is using technology to take away a person's autonomy, whether it be spying on them, whether it be eroding their purchasing power in some way, or essentially inflicting unintended consequences. There have been fraudulent schemes within the cryptocurrency community. For instance, the spectacular collapse of FTX recently is a notable example. And for all of the good that technology can do, ultimately it needs to be paired with human rationality and human goodwill in order to work for optimal human benefit. And this is why discussions such as this one are so important, because I think we are all people of goodwill here. We all seek the best for humankind. We all seek the best for individuals whom we are trying to help. And thinking of the best ways that technology can be harnessed, the best use cases, and the continued technical innovations that would make a better world possible, that would be the way to go. That would be the path out of the issues, some of the unintended side effects that we have been observing, and the general crisis that we are living through.
How do you achieve that? How do you achieve that?
I think we need to utilize this technology as people of goodwill, continue having these conversations, and continue influencing whatever areas of the world, whatever fields of human activity we have direct control over or direct sway over. So whatever it is that we do in our own lives, we want to inject technology into that in beneficial ways and serve as good examples for other people to follow, and do it in a way that's publicly visible so that others can see those good examples and say, I'd like to emulate that. I would like to do the best possible things that could be done with this technology and perhaps avoid some of the cautionary tales that we've also observed.
Good.
Mr. David Smith, what's your concluding remarks?
Well, Sharif, we're over, but just let me finish with maybe 3 real quick points. We live in a highly digital, highly connected world where real-time communications, access to tremendous amounts of information, the ability to learn, get healed, to carry on commerce has been at a time unprecedented in the history of the world.
That's
And
right.
so we're on this cusp of evolving our worldview into a digital enhanced worldview. If you go back and look in the past where ships began to cross the ocean, where airplanes began to fly the skies, they were times of great change and transformation. This future digital economy will be one of those as we work out the challenges such as privacy and security and reciprocal relationships for law that are necessary for it to grow. Second point, as we see the future of healthcare, of medicine, of environmental sustainability go, our life expectancies will be increasing again, even though the last couple of years they actually declined mostly. The importance of lifelong learning has never been greater in the history of the world. The average kid today in elementary school, most likely outside of war and trauma, will live to around 150 years old. Think about how many careers they're going to go through. Think about how much change. The concept of lifelong learning is not just a concept, it's a necessity for our planet to survive and grow and thrive. We have to put the concept of lifelong learning in place. And thirdly, it's through enlightening leadership, much as many of the people today on this panel and you, Dr. Sharif, the other people who've worked with us, enlightened leadership is needed today to change our view from a local view, from a regional view, from just a country view into global views as well. We have to have leadership globally that understands what affects me in Austin, affects you in Bangladesh in many ways, that affects Dr. Talif in Jordan, that affects the rest of us around the world, that affects my colleagues in Sao Paulo. And we've got to understand from a leadership perspective, we've got to think more broadly than we have in the past hundreds of years. And with that, Sharif, I believe that is how we shape the future of this digital economy.
Thank you. Mr. Eric. Mr. Eric, yes.
Unmute.
Yeah. So the real battle to me is the battle for rules and the control. If we make things too controlled and regulated, then we stifle things. If we make things too Wild West, there's no control. I mean, it would be bad if we just said, get rid of traffic rules, everyone drive the way. And that's how it started. You'd see these crazy accidents when people first started cars. So it's good to have some rules, but on the other hand, it's good to have play. And that's, you can just look at the example of computer operating systems. You know, you had Apple, which was very controlled, and Android and Microsoft, which was very, you could do things and add on to it, but, you know, you bumped heads a lot. And I think both those environments are good and important. So for me, it's how do we find the balance between going on the path we are and making that better, and yet adding us to think new ways and find the way to move that innovation side into the way we do business on a day-to-day basis.
Dr. Talib, what's your concluding remarks?
I want to say something here. What David Smith has said is very, very important. What we need is leadership to guide us through all of this precautions that many of you have listed, especially the security part that David Smith talked about. The security part is very, very important here. I think that from a developing world perspective, we are benefiting a lot from digital economy. We are really seeing the benefits directly pouring into us in education, in healthcare, and many, many other fields of that kind. I think that this could lead us to the second point that David said, which is, I forgot what it is. David, could you help me? What's your second point?
Learning, lifelong learning. We're
Learning.
in time for lifelong learning.
Okay, lifetime learning. That's a very important concept because the more we live, the more we need to learn. We are now not old, but older than what we were before. And that's important. That's an important concept to keep us going on. I believe that the developing world will benefit from digital economy because the world is coming together and the knowledge is coming more accessible to anybody. And that's important. Accessibility of knowledge is very important. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jason.
Thank you. Yeah, I echo the same point in that what appears to be an economic problem is actually a real success, which is that people's average lifespans can and have increased. During the pandemic, the big average is dragged down. And so it's been a hard time, but we know what's possible in medicine and we can see the long shape of the curve too. And I mean, the way that finance is structured, it creates an economic dilemma, really, because the retirement plans they're not designed for people to live as long as what we expect actually the average to be. And so, I mean, there are answers to that. It's just that we have to, in a way that is well governed, manage it. Manage the changes that are needed, the adjustments that are needed for the fact that the plan that was created for the technologies and the generation and the society at the time, some of the variables have changed. Some very important variables have changed. Like for the average productivity of a worker and the average lifespan, the expected lifespan of a person. So, the prospect of lifelong learning really is a wonderful one when coupled with a long lifespan. And although this is very rosy, I wanted to also mention that even with a longer lifespan, the ultimate scarcity still is time. It still is attention. Person and their attention and where that attention is going to go, both as a consumer and as a producer, will represent the most scarce ultimate thing for us collectively and individually. And other than what is made artificially scarce. We had talked, Eric said that, Eric mentioned that the competitiveness of the industry has taken an unhealthy shape in the way that the competitiveness is about control over the rules. And I mean, fair point by itself, right? I don't want to completely unpack that, but we will over time unpack that. That is the nature of information moving forward. And that this part is definitely incremental in the way that other people respond to the circumstance whole. When the word is out and everybody knows, then there's no effort to try to keep a lid on the information that is already out. and that where that authority is drawn from and how it's drawn from by the will of the people and their consent, their collectivized consent, and the sense of justice that is necessary as a necessary driving force for the concept of property. I mean, that is an accumulation of information that it has an economic value, although I think we'll have to save it for another session to talk about productivity and talk about communities, like localities, thinking globally. To David Smith's point about how every locality will need to have its purchasing power, like proportionately, and they'll be trying to increase it, and reasonably so, right? So within that, right, participating in the global opportunity to invite into the local world. We have sort of like a walled garden imagined here of our own locality, whatever that is, and we're trying to invite the opportunity from the whole world and participate. And also part of that opportunity from the world is it's both directions, right? Because we're the consumer of all the excellent things that come from everywhere, and we're also the supplier of deeper markets, and so the digital representations and all of that, I mean, they do in some ways represent the form and shape of it when you reduce it right down to it being information. That's, I guess, my concluding remark for now. I wish that we had forever to keep talking about all this stuff.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. This is an excellent discussion, especially, I believe, especially the entrepreneur, the youth communities, the people from emerging economy, those who regularly use World Talent Economy Forum content. This content will be very helpful for all of you. And beside that, you know that World Talent Economy Forum, we are organizing conference in Bangladesh with few largest universities, Dhaka University, Ahsanullah University, IIT, Gujarat Chamber of Commerce, all of the important organization and university, they are collaborating with World Talent Economy Forum. We are closely working with Prime Minister Office and Central Bank, and we are developing different cities. What we learned from our 700 episode, we are executing. We are more in action beside this dialogue. Those who really interested to join in our projects, I want to welcome you all. We are developing cities, hospitals, university, research centers, and definitely we need it. So thank you, Dr. Eric, Dr. Talib Raphael, Mr. Jason, Mr. Janedy, Mr. David Smith, and Mr. David Schumacher for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. I request all of our audience, please share our content with your government agency, corporation, and academy. And beside that, those who want to support our project, I want to welcome you all. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.